Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 124 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Erzman, and today we've got a really interesting show and also a really important topic for us to talk about together. Today my guest is Jim Holm. Jim is a former pastor at the Faith Community, which is part of Butler Church in Fresno, California. Jim has nearly 50 years of experience as a pastor in the MB denomination, and he's currently serving as the co-chair of the California unit of Mennonite Disaster Service, or MDS. So many of you listening probably are at least vaguely familiar with MDS. We've had other people from MDS on before. It's a great organization that we're proud to be a part of. And one of the unfortunate realities of the world that we live in and the 24-hour news cycle, for many of us around the country, the LA wildfires feel like forever ago. But honestly, those horrible fires were really just a few weeks ago, back in January. All of us have seen those tragic images of the really horrible devastation that happened in LA and the surrounding counties. Some good work is going on right now to try to help and rebuild and restore, but honestly, it's going to be a years-long process before those areas look anything remotely normal like they used to. So luckily, there are great organizations like MDS. This is a really good one. I hope you enjoy it. So let's take a quick break to hear from today's sponsor, and then we'll get to my conversation with Jim Holm.
Ascent, USMB's annual summer camp for high schoolers, is coming to Camp WOW in Stewart, Oklahoma, June 7th through the 11th. The 5-day gathering includes worship sessions, activities, and interactive tracks. Register by the end of April to receive the early bird cost of $345 per student and $200 per adult. A $50 per person travel subsidy is available for any church more than a 7-hour drive from Camp WOW. Visit www.usmbnextgen.com/ascent to learn more or to register.
All right, friends. Well, today I'm excited to introduce you to a new friend to the podcast, and we're going to have, I think, a really meaningful conversation today. I'm looking forward to talking with Jim Holm. Jim is the California unit co-chair of MDS, Mennonite Disaster Service. He's also a former pastor, just recently retired from Faith Community, part of Butler Church in Fresno. So Jim's been in the USMB clan for a long time. So Jim, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Glad to have you with us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Well, what did I miss, Jim? Tell us more about you, your family, involvement with your church, anything else that you'd like to share.
Well, I have a long background in Mennonite Brethren church leadership. I was a pastor in various locations for a total of almost 50 years, retiring just recently from that. My wife and I, Shirley, have been married for 53 years, and we have 2 grown sons and 3 grandchildren. We live in Fresno.
Awesome. Very good. And tell me about the MDS side of things. When did you first get involved with Mennonite Disaster Service, and what kind of prompted your involvement?
Well, all the years I was a pastor, I was aware of Mennonite Disaster Service, but I didn't know anything about it other than what I would hear at conferences and so on when they would make reports. I'd never been personally involved with MDS. And about 3 years ago, I was approached and asked whether I would consider becoming the chair of the California unit board for MDS. And I was nearing retirement from pastoral ministry, but I didn't want to retire from everything. And so I thought, well, this sounds like an opportunity. So without really any knowledge of MDS and how it operated, I agreed to become the chair of the board for California. And that happened 3 years ago, and I'm well into it now. So, and I might just say, by way of a side note, that MDS has sort of a 3-tiered organization. At the lowest level are the units, which can be either a state or part of a state or anything like that. It's where there's a group of MDS churches together. And then above the unit is the region, and the United States is divided into 4 regions. And then above that is the national organization. And so that's the way MDS is structured.
Good, very good. And I imagine a lot of our listeners will be at least kind of vaguely familiar with MDS. We've had Kevin King on before, and hopefully a lot of their churches are involved in some capacity. But in case they're not, or if they're relatively new, can you what is MDS, and how, maybe explain how MBs are a part of that?
Well, Mennonite Disaster Service is an organization that's been around for 75 years. In fact, this is its 75th anniversary this year. And to put it most simply, what we do is build houses. We build houses for people whose homes have been destroyed by a disaster, fire, flood, tornado, hurricane, those kinds of things. and
hmm
who do not have the means to rebuild themselves. Either they have no insurance, they have only limited insurance, they have no savings or investments that can help them. So these are people whose homes have been destroyed and who have no options as to where to turn. MDS comes in and offers to help them by rebuilding their home through the use of our volunteers. And Mennonite Brethren have been involved with MDS almost since the beginning. I don't know for sure when the first MBs were actually part of the volunteer process, but for years and years, MBs have been an integral part of MDS. Particularly any projects done in the western part of the United States have always had MBs involved in them in some way.
It's a great organization. And in just a minute, we'll talk about specifically the California wildfires and your involvement and MDS's involvement. But since you're here, I'd also just like to hear you speak, since you have a kind of unique perspective as a former pastor. You've been a pastor for many, many years, and now you're in this role. Can you just talk about why it's important, why you think it's important to you that MBs are involved in a ministry like this? Like, why is rebuilding houses so important as a part of our MB faith and our denomination?
Yeah, there's several possible responses to that. One, all of us who follow Jesus have a commitment to service, and MBs are no less that way than other groups. We all feel a sense that we would like to serve. Not all of us are gifted with the gift of evangelism or the kinds of abilities to go out and make contact with people and share the gospel. But this is a way for people to share their passion for Christ with people who desperately need help, and to do it in a way that is what we sometimes call soft evangelism, which means that it's a way of reaching out to people that allows volunteers to use the skills and gifts that they have and help other people. And MBs have always warmed to that. That's one of the reasons why over the years, MBs have volunteered in service commitments many, many times. And this is another form of doing that.
As you mentioned, this is MDS's 75th anniversary, and you just had a big party over here at Ridgepoint, in my neck of the woods, to kind of recognize your 75th anniversary. And it was cool for me to see. I think people probably know that our bigger Mennonite family is very diverse, right? At the conference, there's some kind of cool video of, some Amish people helping build houses right alongside with kind of the more progressive General Conference Mennonite. So it's kind of a uniting factor that we can all come together in a Baptist background and serve people. I think that alone, I think, is worth something, right? It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, we wouldn't all necessarily agree on the fine points of theology or on our interpretations of some of the scriptures. But when we come to helping people, those are not the kinds of questions we ask. We ask, do people need help? And am I a person who would be available to help? And so whether I believe a certain way about a certain social issue and others on the team with me have different beliefs, we don't talk about politics and MDS projects. We don't talk about religious differences. We're there to serve and to help. And so it brings people together from, as you just mentioned, a very diverse set of backgrounds.
Yeah, it's very cool. And you're able to accomplish a lot, which is really great, which is cool to see. So you briefly kind of explained the different levels of MDS, and you're the co-chair of a unit. So what exactly does it mean for you to be the co-chair of the California unit? What are your responsibilities?
Yeah, so the California unit is responsible for responding to any disasters within the state of California. Now, that doesn't mean we respond to every disaster, because MDS is a small organization with a limited number of volunteers. But when a disaster occurs in California, we try to determine if it is something to which we can respond and then take appropriate steps to begin to do that. So the board I chair, and there's about a dozen people on the California board, the board that I chair as a disaster occurs, like the Los Angeles wildfires, which you and I are going to get to in a minute, we ask ourselves, is this something to which MDS can respond? And if so, when and how can our response come? That's part of our job. The other part that's significant is that we want to develop a connection with every Anabaptist Mennonite church in the state of California. And we like to appoint a contact person in every church. We call them a church contact person, cleverly enough.
Okay.
Try to appoint that person so that when a disaster strikes and we have a response needed, we can call that person and say, will you help us get people who can volunteer to respond to this particular need?
Well, I imagine every different unit, I'm sure, has different challenges, but in California, you have a fair share of disasters in your area. And so between fires and, there's earthquakes and there's just a lot of things that happen in your area. So we were chatting just briefly beforehand, and I know maybe one of the toughest parts of your job at MDS in general is deciding when do you help, how are you able to help, and how do you make those decisions of where those lines are, right? So how does MDS make those kinds of decisions?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because I'm eager to talk about that. MDS is not primarily an immediate response organization. That is, we don't come in with food and clothing and immediate housing and so on. In most cases, there are exceptions to that, but in most cases we don't. That's where organizations like the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and so on come in and touch the immediate needs of people. As I mentioned to you at the outset, we are builders. So we come in after the debris has been cleaned up, after the plans have been laid for rebuilding, after the permits have been pulled and people are ready to start. Then we come in and work with home or property owners to rebuild the house that burned down from where they were. And for MDS to get involved in the project, we have to find answers to what we call the 4 pillars. And if we can't get all 4 pillars answered, then it's not a project that MDS would get involved in. And the 4 pillars are very simple. The first one is volunteers. Do we have enough volunteers that have made themselves available? That is, people who have signed up on the MDS website and said, call me when you need a volunteer, I'll see if I can come. So do we have enough volunteers that we think, yes, we can respond to that need, because there are volunteers available. If we send the word out, we expect to get some response. The second pillar is called accommodations. We do not put our volunteers up at hotels and motels. That's very expensive. So we try to find accommodations where we can house volunteers in sort of a bunkhouse situation, where the guys are in one area, the girls are in, women are in another area. And there have to be adequate kitchen facilities, adequate restroom facilities, adequate showers, all of those kind of things. So before we come into any community, we have to say, where will our volunteers live? Because most of our projects go on for several months at a time. Now, the volunteers change much more often than that, but the project itself may go on for 3-4 months or even a year or two. And so we need a place that volunteers can stay. So accommodations. The third pillar is funding. MDS furnishes volunteers, but we don't furnish money. So we don't buy materials for rebuilding. So the local area where the disaster strikes, they form a recovery group whose responsibility it is to find the resources, either through government, through private foundations, through businesses, through charitable organizations and religious organizations, to get the money together to pay for the materials. That's the third pillar.
Okay.
And the fourth pillar is perhaps one of the most important ones. We call it meaningful work. And that says, do our volunteers feel like they're helping somebody who really needs help? So we don't go in and build houses for people who had a multi-million-dollar house that burned down. We assume that people like that probably have resources. And most of the volunteers wouldn't feel good about working on a house of that type. So we want our volunteers to believe that they are coming in to know, not just believe, but to know that they're working for people who have no other means. And so all of the people who MDS helps go through a process of case management, which is not handled by MDS, it's handled by other organizations, that determines what their financial need really is and if they're people that need help. And those are the people that we try to help. So those 4 pillars are always have to be in place before MDS takes on a project.
Yeah, good. I could see how that'd be very helpful. Good. So let's maybe start to jump into the California wildfire stuff. So I know the unfortunate reality of the American news cycle is a lot of people have kind of quote unquote moved on. It seems like this happened a long time ago. It hasn't really. I know it's still a very active scene even near you. And so we're recording very end of February, beginning of March. What's the current status of things? Can you give us an update?
Well, the current status of things is that in the area where we would work, which is Altadena, a community located right next door to Pasadena, California, in that area, over 6,000 homes were burned, destroyed. And that's a huge portion of that city. I don't have an estimate as to how much, but it's an enormous amount of homes in that community that have been taken. And as of this point, the the cleanup process is still in operation. Of course, after a fire, there's all kinds of toxic waste because of all the chemicals that we store in our houses, and they're burned into the ashes. So that all has to be done. That's handled by the EPA. And then after the toxic waste has been removed, then you go in and clear out all of the debris. And that's the process that's going on now. Following that, there will be the plans for rebuilding, which will require getting permits from the city, making sure that the houses that are going to be rebuilt meet standards. And of course, now, because they live in a fire zone, there will be additional fire regulations that will have to be done. So all of that is going on in LA right now. MDS has made some initial responses, and you can ask me about that in a minute if you want. But the actual going in and doing a project is probably 6 months to a year from now, when they get to the phase where they're rebuilding houses, and that's where we step in.
And again, I kind of want to just take a minute. I think, again, when the fires were first happening, a lot of us saw some of the devastating images. I'm sure it hits closer to home to you. And this is just a huge disaster. And you just kind of casually mentioned 6,000 homes. And I think sometimes we read numbers and hear numbers and we just don't really internalize them. But this is devastating, right? Can you just expand on that some more?
Yeah, it's sort of cliched to say it, but it has to be said. It looks like a bomb blew up in those neighborhoods. Entire city blocks are gone, where every single house on a block is destroyed. Then, because of the nature of the wind, the fire skips some houses. And so you'll find a block where all the houses are gone except one, and it stands there. So even though the people who live in that house still have a home, they don't have a neighborhood. Everything that existed in the neighborhood is gone. And there were 6 schools that were burned. So kids don't even have a place to go to school. So their whole life is turned upside down. And businesses, of course, that were in that area are burned. So people who had jobs in those businesses, gardeners and housekeepers who cared for these people's homes, they're all out of work. The impacts of something like this are just enormous. And it's just almost beyond belief to drive through those neighborhoods and see pile after pile of ashes, and every valuable thing these people have owned is gone. Where family pictures and business papers and all of that could be gone. And going through the process of getting some of that stuff back is really horrendous. So it's beyond belief, really, to see those kinds of things. Well, we see them on the news, but in person, it just hits you with the reality of it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned with all the permits and all the different steps of rebuilding, it's years. I don't know what the soonest that area might look quote unquote normal again, but I imagine it's several years, right?
Yeah, the normal process is 2 to 3 years before a neighborhood begins to look like itself. Los Angeles has some big events coming up, which may cause the city officials to speed up the process. The Olympics are going to be in LA in 2028, I think.
8, yeah.
And then the World Cup finals are in LA within the next year or two, and that's an enormous venue.
Yes.
So and the Paralympics are coming from the other Olympics.
Right.
So what LA wants to do is get people back into their homes and out of temporary housing, because all that temporary housing will be necessary when all of these people from outside the community come in. So there is a push to speed things up. Whether that will actually happen and how it will happen, I do not know.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned all those steps. So tell me again, when's kind of the earliest that MDS might be able to be involved?
Well, the fires were in January and February. I would estimate that to do any actual rebuilding would be at a minimum of 6 months from those days. So late summer, early fall, but it's entirely possible that it could be a year or more before we actually get in and start building. Processes of rebuilding always seem to take longer than it's like remodeling your house. It always takes longer than you thought it would.
Right. And I know we've done a little bit of research, and I don't believe any MB churches were directly affected, but I know some Anabaptist kind of close neighbors of ours were affected. Have you heard any stories of people close to our families?
We have been down there and checked with them. Yes, as soon as the fires came, I contacted our MB conference minister here for the Pacific District and informed me that no MB churches were directly impacted by by the fires. I mean, they may have smelled smoke or things like that, but no direct fire damage. There are several Mennonite and or Anabaptist churches in the fire community. There are 4 that we have been in contact with, we meaning MDS. And all of those 4 churches rather, have congregants who have suffered loss in the fire. And so they're located in the Pasadena area or in Pasadena itself or Altadena, and they had people who have lost their homes.
Yeah.
So what we have done, because we are the organization that comes in later after the initial, what we have done is make contact with those churches to let them know that we are here and that we will be here, and that as the process moves forward, we will be taking a serious look at how we can be involved. And we are explaining the 4 pillars that I just told you about, because they need to understand that until those things are in place, we just can't come in and work. But we anticipate that will happen and that we will be able to be involved there. The only direct thing that we have done so far as a California unit is there were 3 congregations meeting in one church building. And that church building was 3 or 4 blocks away from the burned out area.
Okay.
The building itself was not damaged. It was filled with smoke and ashes that come in through every crack in the windows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we did contribute financially as a California unit to helping those 3 congregations get their building professionally cleaned to remove it of smoke, smell, and toxic waste that might have blown in there, so that they could return. And I believe that this coming Sunday will be the first Sunday that those 3 congregations return to their building. They've been worshiping in temporary places for the last several weeks. So we were able to help immediately with that. What we are doing is staying in touch with those churches and trying to check out where we might have volunteers down there and who can be involved. And we will look forward to getting more involved as the rebuilding gets closer.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You're able to help even quickly like that. That's wonderful. And I imagine it's hard, even if a community meets the 4 pillars, you still have to make decisions of where you start and who you help and who you're not able to help, I imagine. So do you typically start with churches or people you have a relationship with, or is it just who has the greatest need, or how do you make those decisions?
Well, the simplest answer is we look for the greatest need, because that's where our volunteers want. When we bring volunteers, and we have volunteers come from all over the United States. We have a project going on right now in the Central Valley here in California, and we have volunteers coming from all across the country to serve here. So the primary driver would be how great is the need. However, the fact that there are people who are our sisters and brothers in terms of their denomination or their Anabaptist background, there would certainly be awareness of that. And I don't know that they would be favored, but they certainly would be recognized, and there would be consideration given to them and to their needs. So I don't want to say, yes, we would go to the Anabaptist churches first. On the other hand, I don't want to say they're treated just like everybody else. I mean, it's sort of an in those 2 things.
Is that something that you are able to help decide as the co-chair, or is there
yes, any decisions are made at the level of the local unit, which in this case is California, the regional area, and the national, because the volunteers are going to come from all over the country, and our resources in providing vehicles and housing and all of that, we pay for all of that. So our volunteers pay nothing at all when they're at the job site. So we feed them, we house them, and we have a whole warehouse full of vehicles, trucks and trailers, and all these things we need to take to a job site. And so we will work with Anabaptist churches and with others to try to set up what we need.
Yeah, good. That's amazing. So for now, for the next few months, what do you foresee, like your actual involvement, MDS's involvement? You kind of mentioned you're a little bit at a standstill right now. I know you're still active. You're not just sitting back, but what is it over the next few months? What does that look like?
Yeah, we have visited with all of the Anabaptist churches and leaders that were involved in that. We have met with them personally, driven down there, not only the California unit, but as you mentioned, Kevin King earlier being on your podcast, he has been there as well. And so what we have done is met with those churches just to say, we are here. We are going to be with you. We check in with them regularly. In fact, just this next weekend, I'll be down there with a television crew, with a video crew, I should say, to get stories from people that we can use in preparing another MDS video for use in churches and other settings. So we are staying in touch with them on a regular basis, and we are saying to them, when the time comes to rebuild, we will be helping you. We don't know for sure how that help will play out or what order it will be done in, but we are not forgetting you. And this is a disaster so enormous that we think it's highly likely that MDS needs to be involved. But that decision is made not just by the California unit, but across the system, because it's much bigger than California can respond to on its own.
I know every disaster, I'm sure, is interesting and unique because every fire, every storm, every disaster, I'm sure there are unique problems and things that maybe you can't have a rubric for. But I know that there are some things that are consistent with every time that something like this happens. I guess, you specified when we first started that really MDS is about rebuilding homes. You mentioned Red Cross. I think Samaritan's Purse is pretty active there right now. Can you just give an overview of how do all these organizations work together? And I imagine people just want to help and there's probably good intentions, but that probably often leads to confusion. So can you just talk the bigger picture? How do all these groups work together?
Well, let me try to answer that without getting too deeply into the weeds.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Mm-hmm.
There is in every area of the United States, there is an organization called VOAD, VOAD, and that stands for Volunteer Organizations Assisting in Disasters.
Okay.
And so all of the nonprofits and religious faith-based groups and others, they are part of the VOAD. So when a disaster happens, the VOAD goes into operation and they coordinate all of that. So when we were in Pasadena a few weeks ago, we visited the headquarters of the VOAD, which was distributing aid to people. So in that, this was happened to be the top floor of a hospital that was given to VOAD for a duration. But on that top floor, we saw Samaritan's Purse and the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and the Fireman's Fund and the Islamic Center, assisting people who come from that faith background, and and Catholic charities. I mean, they're all there, and different organizations do different things. So some people provide food and clothing and basic necessities of life. Others help you find a temporary place to live, and so they work on that. So when people get into this VOAD system, they are directed to the partner organizations based on what their need is.
Yeah.
When we were in LA, those organizations were giving out $1 million a day worth of assistance to people.
Wow.
So some people get money to buy groceries. Some people get money to stay in a hotel or motel for a few days. Some people get connections to other kinds of assistance. And of course, everybody needs help filling out forms to get help from FEMA and other government agencies that do provide help for people in disasters.
And I imagine many of our churches listening, I'll just use for Ridgepoint as an example. When we first started hearing about this, we wanted to help in some capacity. So we were in touch with Samaritan's Purse and we were going to send a team, and then they decided they didn't need us. So I think a lot of people listening maybe are they're not exactly sure what to do when these things happen. They want to be involved, whether they want to volunteer or give financially. But I think there's just kind of this, what do I do? What's the best way for me to, what would you advise churches?
That's a very good question. Yeah, at the initial response to a disaster is just overwhelming. And in fact, in LA, they have received so many bottles of water and toilet paper and stuff like that they had 3 warehouses crammed full of that stuff. They couldn't get rid of it all. And they were pleading with people, stop donating that. We just have no place to store all that stuff. And so probably the best thing that people can do is donate financially to some organization that they believe is doing a good job. But sending material is probably not the best thing to do, because there's tons of that stuff that shows up. When a disaster happens immediately, places that need help are like Samaritan's Purse or the Red Cross or Salvation Army. You can also contact MDS, and we will give you a list of organizations where you can consider volunteering or sending supplies or finances if you wish to be involved immediately. MDS, as I've said again, comes in later. And so that's what we need to contact our churches and get them involved. There are only 4 organizations in all of California, that is 4 nonprofit organizations, that are allowed to build homes. And MDS is one of 4. So when it comes to home building, there aren't many options here. And that's where you really use help. And the money that people donate to MDS goes to support volunteers, because as I mentioned, we provide all the housing and all the food and all the expenses for a volunteer when they're on the job. All they have to do is get to the job, and we will take care of all their expenses after they're there. And so that's what the donations that come to MDS primarily go for. And we have volunteers in operations all over the United States and in Canada as well.
Yeah. So let's just do a quick plug for that. So it's just mds.org, I believe, right?
Yeah, mds.org. And they can go to mds.org and make a donation there. And by the way, if they're interested in volunteering at some point, they can also fill out a volunteer application on that website and just say, contact me and I'll see if I'm available. So you're not signing up for a particular disaster. You're just saying, I want to be on the list. I want to know about it. And if I have time and the opportunity, when a disaster happens, I would be willing to be contacted. So yeah, mds.org.
And is this the kind of thing, are you kind of, would you love to have a bunch of electricians and plumbers and handyman, or do you want like literally anybody, or what's the skill level required for something like that?
Yeah, we take anybody because we train people how to work on the job. Obviously, we need people with construction skills, electricians and plumbers and people who understand cement work and drywall and so on. But we find that volunteers can learn very, very quickly what to do if you show them the basics of what is needed.
Yeah.
And so it's not unusual to see Amish girls who always wear dresses up on the roof of a house carrying bundles of shingles around to have available for people to put a roof on a house. I mean, you can, anyone, we always say to people, if you can push a broom, you can help us clean up. If you can paint, you can help us in the project. And you don't have to have any particular skills, though we do also, of course, seek for people in leadership roles who have a set of skills.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad you can use literally anybody. That's good.
We really can.
There's some hope for me, even though I'm useless with any home projects. Maybe the people like me could still help in some capacity.
Well, that's my condition too.
Okay.
I have no construction skills whatsoever, but I can get on the phone and call people and plug them in where they might be most helpful. And so that's my role in MDS. I'm not that good with a hammer or a power saw or something like that. In fact, I'm probably yes with those kinds of things.
Might cause another disaster, huh?
That's what could be. Yeah.
Well, another thing we talked about at the front is that obviously there's benefit in service just for service sake, right? Like it's good for us as believers to serve others. It's good for us to help people in need just because that's, first of all, it's just a good part of being a good human, but it's also clearly part of our faith as well. But you mentioned at the top the whole idea of soft evangelism. Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
Well, in the projects that we work on, first of all, let me back up from that. All of our volunteers live together. So they build a community during the week. We have monthly volunteers. Those are the leadership people. They have to come for at least a month. But we have weekly volunteers, are those who come in just to do the work. But they all live together during that time. They eat together, and the men sleep in one bunk area and women sleep in another. And so they build a lot of community. And as a result, they come into the neighborhoods where they work as a unit of people committed to serve. And when they meet with the homeowners whose houses they're building, that raises a lot of questions. Like, this is, who does this? Why are you all here? And why are these women out here working? And these young people, and what's all that about? And it gives amazing opportunities to sit with the homeowners and to share why we're doing what we're doing, and to hear the story of the homeowners who have perhaps had nobody ever really listen to them talk about what their feelings were. And so there's a remarkable openness that often takes place between the homeowners and the volunteers that come in. And that gives opportunity for people to understand and for us to share about how our love for Jesus is motivating us to come and do this. It's not we don't take people through the four spiritual laws or anything like that. But we do seek opportunity to speak with them about the most meaningful parts of their life and share with them why it is that we are motivated to come and help them.
That's awesome. What an amazing witness that can be. I love it. That's
It
great.
can be a very great witness. Yeah.
Well, especially when people are so distraught and so I'm sure they feel hopeless, right? If their lives are literally taken away from them, having someone like this, I'm sure, is very meaningful.
We have volunteers who we basically say to them, look, we don't care if you do any work at all. Just sit down and talk to the homeowner and let them tell their story. And so often the homeowners have never had anybody listen to them. And they break down in tears and they cry as they relive. And it becomes a real healing experience for them. And we offer to pray with them. We offer to share with them in other ways as opportunities open up. And it's just a remarkable experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also want to hit, and I'm probably going to get these numbers wrong. I'm not sure if you'll know them off the top of your head, but one thing I've heard Kevin say before, Kevin King, is that when he started, there was a certain number of disasters a month, I believe. And now just the sheer number of disasters taking place in America has just exploded over the past few decades. There's just a lot of, again, fires and storms and earthquakes. So can you just kind of help us understand the scope and the amount of the need? Do you know any of those numbers, or just the overall trend?
I can't give you off the top of my head the number of places that MDS is involved currently, but across the United States, we have units working at this moment in disaster relief. But just to take California as an example, if you would go back 15 years ago, California was not experiencing significant disasters. We, of course, knew the big earthquake was coming, but it hadn't come, and it still hasn't come, and we don't know when it will come. We just know it's going to come. But about 15 or a dozen, let me back up, a dozen or 15 years ago, we just started having fires because of the droughts that we've been going through. We had huge wildfires. There was this wildfire up in Paradise, which until Lahaina came in a couple of years ago, was the most deadly fire in terms of the history of the United States. 85 people burned to death in that fire. And since then, California has had multiple fires. And then when we do have significant rain events, and the fire has come through first, then we have mudslides destroying people's homes. So across this country, whether one attributes it to climate change and global warming or not, the fact is that the number of disasters is increasing and increasing dramatically. And I don't have the number, but I could look it up and get it to you. But we have seen an enormous increase in disasters. And Kevin is right. He's been involved with the organization more than 20 years, and he has seen a huge increase in the demand. It's unbelievable. And we have a new natural disaster, it seems like, almost every week or two.
See, I think it doesn't take too much convincing to tell people that the need is very great. It's easy to see if you just look at the headlines, right? And you've done a great job showing some examples of how meaningful this work is. And obviously, we could say MDS.org again. You can give, sign up to volunteer. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts, wrapping it all together? Anything else we didn't get to?
Well, it's a wonderful ministry. It's a ministry I didn't know much about before I got into it, but I just have seen the wonderful work which these volunteers do, the spirit in which they approach their work, and the joy which the homeowners receive when their home is completed. We have a ceremony at the end of when the house is completed. We hand the homeowner a Bible and a wall hanging that is made by some of our churches. And we have a prayer service just to dedicate that home and the homeowner. And it's just a remarkable experience. And I'm grateful to be a part of it.
One question I should have asked earlier. Do you know what was the origin or the thought behind building homes? Why did MDS kind of hone in on that as a project?
The organization began in Kansas 75 years ago. And a group of people in a Sunday school class, in fact, said, after there was a disaster, and I don't remember which disaster it was, but a group of people in a Sunday school class said, what can we do And these were probably mostly farm ag people at that time, 75 years ago. And they just say, well, we know how to build things. So let's go in and volunteer to build. And that became the mission of MDS. In a word, the way we describe ourselves, we often say we're the last in and we're the last out. Mm-hmm. We come in after all the other organizations have come in with the emergency relief. Then we come in and build houses. But once they've all gone on to the next disaster, we're still there finishing up those houses, and we're often the last ones to leave.
That's awesome. Well, it's a great ministry, Jim. I'm grateful for you and your leadership and everyone who's involved in this. Just such important work for people when they have literally nothing else to turn to, for a group like MDS to come in and share the love of Jesus in a practical, tangible way. Like you said, what a gift that is, and what a gift it is to be part of those teams too. I'm sure you hear a lot of cool stories of people involved in that. Okay, well, one more time, mds.org. Any other closing thoughts, Jim?
Just thank you for the opportunity to share this. I hope it's helpful to people, and I hope it actually helps us make contact with potential volunteers, because we will be looking for them. And if people want to come to Los Angeles and help, I'm sure we'll be getting the word out in the next months, seeking people to come and help us there.
Very good.
If people want to come to California in the winter and work in a place like LA, we would welcome them to come.
Yeah, there you go. When it's 0 degrees elsewhere in the country, come swing a hammer in California.
That, by the way, many of our volunteers come exactly for that reason, because they're snow-covered areas and come out to California to do a project that feels like summertime to them.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Jim, thanks again for your leadership, and maybe we'll have to have you on and you can give us an update a few months down the road to let us know how it's going. So thanks for your time, Jim. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Well, one more time, my thanks to Jim for his time today, but also just for his leadership with MDS, and more specifically, this specific project. I know he's going to have his hands full for months to come. So Jim, we're just so grateful for your leadership. Thank you to all the MDS crew for this really great effort. And as Jim spelled out, there's Red Cross, Samaritan's Purse. These are all these groups that come together to help people in times of need like this. But I love that our extended family just wants to rebuild homes more than just swinging hammers and painting walls. They want to help these people restore their lives and share the love of Jesus in very practical, very tangible ways. I love that. So, dear listeners, I encourage you to check out mds.org. And on that page, there's a way for you to learn more or sign up to volunteer to be involved with this. Like Jim said, if you're looking for a chance to get to California, this might be a great way to do that and really help out with a great cause. And I also appreciate that even people like me who have 0 construction or handyman skills, there's still a place for those of us who don't have those skills but have other skills. So wherever your specialties lie, I encourage you to check out the options there. One more time, mds.org for all the information about that. You can donate online or sign up to volunteer. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. So once again, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week ahead, and we'll see you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.